What we're going to do in this tutorial is run through the process of making a simple block chair using the furniture item sample file. Now you can get this from the Catsbits website. This is using Blender 2.49. So what you'll see when you open the file are two avatar helper meshes, a simple cube, and a number of armature objects. These will all come into play later on. On the right we have a texture view. Below that we have an animation window if we were to do some animation. Below that, bottom right, is a text view where you'll see the readme and information about the file itself. And bottom left are the properties and buttons. First thing you want to do is to get familiar with the way you navigate around Blender's 3D view. Now there are three buttons. The main button to use is middle mouse, so if you hold the middle mouse button anywhere on screen and move it, the scene will rotate. Generally it rotates around a virtual center. So if you hold, move to the left, you rotate. If you hold, move up and down, you rotate up and down. The next control is to use shift in conjunction with the middle mouse button. So if you hold the shift down, then press the middle mouse button, this allows you to strafe left, right, up, down. And then finally, if you hold the control key down and then middle mouse button, that allows you to zoom. The middle mouse button also does this, but it's not as controllable. So using a combination of the three controls, middle mouse button on its own, shift plus middle mouse button, and control middle mouse button, we can move around the scene itself and position the objects anywhere. It's important to get familiar with this mechanism because you can't do anything without it. The main reason for using the sample file or the template file is because it's already set up for you relative to the elements that are needed to produce a furniture item for IMVU. But not only that, the object, the simple cube, is the correct size for the height of something the avatars will sit on. So if move this cube underneath the avatar, you can see that it fits perfectly underneath the seated avatar. This basically just eliminates all the guesswork and all the general messing around of trying to get the sizing right of objects relative to the two avatar meshes or the helpers. All you need to do then is just concentrate on using the cube to build your object from, which is what we'll do. So, hide the standing helper, right mouse click the avatar mesh, press the M key, which opens the layers menu, and just click one of the empty or another layer that we don't need, and then OK, and the avatar disappears. Do this with the rest of the objects that we don't need. which are the standing helpers armature. So again, select that with the right mouse click, M, select the layer, OK. If we scroll out, middle mouse button scroll, we can also do that with the light objects. Now, because there are several objects in the scene, we can select them, multi-select, by holding the Shift key down whilst we click with the right mouse button. So we selected one, right mouse click, hold the Shift key, right mouse click again, and you've selected two objects. Press the M key and move that to the layer that we've been using to move every other object to. Once we move those lights out of the way, the scene becomes flat lit. With the male seated helper in place, right mouse click, Shift, right mouse click, so we select the avatar mesh and the armature, and then using the red handle of the manipulator widget, hold Control down and move it so it's approximately center. Rotate around, do the same thing again, hold this time with the green handle, hold Control and centralize it. We'll use this as a positional device relative to the chair. If we now select the cube by right clicking it, same thing again, the green handle, hold Control and move that into place. From this, we've got the basics of our block chair. Now, to do the actual editing, with the cube selected, press the Tab key. We can now select elements of the cube. And we do that again using right mouse select. Right mouse click a single item, or Shift right mouse click multiple items. And the face will highlight, indicating that it is now selected as the active element. Right, so all we need to do now is just do a few bits of manipulating of the mesh and we shall build our chair. First things first, extrude. Press the E key. We only want the face, so select region. Hold Control key down. We'll snap the movement. Left mouse click to confirm. Let's do that on the other side again. Right mouse, Shift, right mouse, right mouse, right mouse, select the face, press E, region. The faces are extruded, but we want to control them, so hold the Control key down and then left mouse click to confirm. Again with the back, Shift, select all the vertices along the back, press the E key, region, and again hold the Control key to snap. Now you can see already we've got the basis of a simple chair-like object. What we can do from here is switch the way the mesh is selected by using Control Tab and selecting faces. Because of the extrusions that we've just made, it's changed the way that the structure of the mesh appears, meaning that we can use faces to do some further manipulation of the mesh. And all we're going to do is select these faces around the edge that we've just created, so that's right mouse click and then Shift right mouse the rest of the faces and extrude those upwards. So once they're selected, press the E key, region, hold Control down and just pull them upwards. And there we have the basis of our simple block chair. We need to make one or two minor adjustments to it though, so, because it's too narrow. Using the avatar helper we can see that his elbows intersect with the sides of the chair, so we need to change that. So, another type of selection, hold the Alt key down using the right mouse button, click one of the edges. What this does is it selects a loop of either faces, edges or vertices depending on the select mode, which was the control tab. We're in faces at the moment, so it will select a loop of faces. So once that's done, left click the red handle, hold the control key down and move the selection to one side slightly, then release. As you'll see, we've missed a vertex, so change select mode, control tab to vertex, select that vertex in the corner. Because we're in textured mode this might be tricky, so press the Z key twice, which drops us down into wireframe mode. And as you can see, there are actually two stray vertices here, so right mouse select, widget arrows in the way, so right mouse click the outer one first, then shift the inner, move around, left click the handle, the red handle, hold control and move that into place, and that's fixed that problem. We can also do the same thing on the other side, but we might as well remain in wireframe mode, but this time to select the vertices so we catch the stray hidden ones. Press the B key to use the border select tool. When the lines appear, left mouse click, hold and drag a selection area. It grabs all the elements that were inside that selection area. We also need to get rid of the two vertices that were previously selected, so to redo that we can either shift right mouse click the two of them, or we can deselect everything by pressing the A key and then redo the border select. Press the B key, left mouse click, drag and select. Once done, red handle, left click, hold the control key down and move it outwards away from the avatar and then release. And that is the basic box chair modelled. So let's just flip back into texture mode. Alt Z is the shortcut for that, or clicking on the draw type button and selecting textured, wireframe and shaded or solid. The ones you'll use the most generally are textured, solid and wireframe. And that's the chair basically modelled. So exit edit mode for now with the tab key and just use the middle mouse key just to move around and inspect what you've done. Before moving on to the next step, which is to UV map or unwrap the chair, save the file. So File, Save As, select a location. The double dots take you back up. Just click on a folder to take you back into the folder. Rename the file and just click Save As. So that's the chair saved. Basically that means that if the application crashes or we make a mistake, we've got a version that we can revert to. One of the reasons for using the template file is because it's pretty much set up with the basic material. It's actually got a UV map assigned to it and the texture. So basically what this means is that all we need to do is adjust the available UV map that's already on the mesh, rather than trying to do it from scratch. So, to edit the UV map, right mouse select the object, press the tab key to enter edit mode. Now what we need to do here, and this is the basic principle of UV unwrapping, is that we've got to imagine that this object is a cardboard box and we need to lay it out flat. That results from that is the UV map. So what we've got to do then is inspect the mesh to see where we can create a series of lines or markers that will facilitate this. So usually for an object like this, edges that would be the most useful. Control tab, change the select mode to edges, deselect or right mouse click one of the other edges just to deselect everything that was already selected. Then hold the shift and just go around the outer edges of the mesh. Now this is difficult to see, so switch to wireframe mode and we can see the selections better then. What we want to do next is place some seams. So Control E and select Mark Seam. They will turn orange, indicating that they've been marked as UV seams. Deselect with the A key or right mouse click another edge to deselect anything else that's already been selected again. Hold the shift key and just go around the outer edge. Control E, mark seam. Do the same along the back edge and the bottom. Control E, mark seam. Do the same along the front. Along the inner edge, and just mark a seam for those as well. Now we've got to a point where we need to make a decision as to how the inside of the mesh is unwrapped. Let's just make this a little bit easier to see by exiting edit mode, tab key, and left mouse clicking the layer that the chair mesh is in. That hides all the other objects and reveals just the chair, so we can continue, press the tab key, we can continue unhindered. We've got to a point where we need to make a decision about how the inner surfaces of the chair are unwrapped. Press the Z key just to go into solid mode to make this easier to see. We can either unwrap them relative to the rest of the chair as a single surface, or we can continue to treat each of the flat planes as an individual surface. If we do the latter, we need to go back over the mesh, shift, and isolate each of the surfaces with an edge, then Control E to mark seam. If we press the Z key, we can see how each of the inner surfaces is now its own or sub-element. To unwrap this or redo the UV map that was already assigned to the object, press the A key to select all, and then the U key to open the UV calculation menu and unwrap. Now you should see a change in the UV map at the top there. To resize views, move the mouse over the line, wait for the double-headed arrow, left click, hold and just drag. Back in the 3D view, Alt Z we can see how the texture has been distributed over the mesh. Now what we might want to do here is tidy this up a little bit, because at the moment the entire mesh is mapped to a relatively small texture. So what we can do is adjust this in the UV map editor. Press the A key to deselect everything, A key again to reselect. The same manipulation controls for the 3D view apply to the UV editor. So middle mouse hold to move the object around, control to zoom, shift middle mouse to strafe. We need to get a better texture distribution, and the way we do this is by scaling the UV map relative to the amount of texture space that's available. The texture space is the actual texture size. The UV map can be resized relative to that. Keeping an eye on this front section, which is this section of the UV map, A twice. In the UV map editor, press the S key once everything's selected. You may need to make sure you position the mouse a distance away from the center so that we get better control over the scaling. Hold the control key down and scale it so that it's approximately twice its original size, as indicated in the bottom left corner there where it says scale X is 2, Y is 2. Left mouse click to confirm. And then what we can do is just use the G key, so press G, and move the UV map around. In essence, because this is a tileable texture, we don't need to do much else with respect to the UV map's layout other than making sure all the little elements of the UV map are all facing in the right direction, because otherwise what will happen is that if, for instance, this were a chair with a fabric texture applied to it that had a grain to the fabric, like corduroy, you'd want the UV map to be set up in such a way that, regardless as to what you were looking at on the mesh, the grain was always facing in the right direction relative to the chair and the fabric. So, one of the reasons why the sample texture has numbers and checkers on it is so that we can see that visually. So this surface needs to be changed. So again, holding shift, right mouse click, select the surfaces, then in the UV editor, press the R key, rotate, holding the control key down, left mouse click to confirm, to rotate those surfaces. What we've got on the back here is a reverse texture assignment, so right mouse click, shift, select each face in the 3D view, then in the editor press the M key to open or access the mirror menu, and then click either the X or Y depending on which way the UV map needs to be flipped. So X in this case, then again with the Y axis to flip it upside down. And then looking at the inside of the mesh, that surface is okay, that surface is okay, but this one is flipped upside down and back to front. So again, right mouse select, in the UV editor, M, Y axis, and again X axis. We don't need to bother too much about the underside of a mesh because they're generally not visible in IMVU. Once that's done, that's the mesh basically made and UV mapped. The next step is to basically get it ready for export for IMVU. before doing that, save the file. So exit edit mode, press the tab key and just save the file again. Save as to, enter, then click save as. Now to make the chair usable in IMVU, we need to do two things to it. One is to add an armature to it so it has its own internal skeleton, and the other is to add a seat node to the chair. This enables the avatars to be able to sit on the chair. First things first, we need to position the helper and the seating armature relative to the chair so the avatar sits in it correctly in IMVU. So using the Layers button, left mouse select the layer the helper is on, and shift click the chair layer. Now the avatar is more or less positioned correctly, but what we can do is make some fine adjustments. So if we go into wireframe mode so that we can see this better, click the Z, press Z key. Now we want to change the way the view appears so that we can assess the positioning of the helper and the seating armature relative to the chair. So to do this, press number pad 5 and then either 1 or 3 to see the front or side views. Reposition the scene so that you can see all the objects. Right mouse click the armature for the seating, shift right mouse click the helper, and left mouse click on the green widget arrow. Hold the control key down and move the avatar away from the seat slightly. Release to set the position. Because the avatar is positioned a bit too far away from the seat, what we can do is, with them still selected, left mouse click the green arrow again, hold control and then shift to snap to smaller increments. Move the helper and the armature to a better position and then just release the left mouse button to confirm the move. Next we need to reposition everything relative to the seat's armature. To do this, press the A key to deselect everything and then A key again to select everything. Now the position of the chair is going to be relative to its use. If we look at the scene, there's a blue axis marker which can be used to represent a wall. Now if the chair was to be set against a wall, it would need to be repositioned in such a way that that's going to be okay to do, so that the chair doesn't intersect the wall. If the chair were to be freestanding in the room, we can position the chair so that its mass is effectively center of the grid. Now if we activate the layer with the armature for the chair, which hold the shift key down, left click the layer, we can see the armature. Just reposition that slightly. We can see the armature. This is the element IMVU uses to position objects in a room. So what we want to do with the chair is leave it as a freestanding chair. So again, just to recap, all we need to do is make sure the chair is basically centered over the blue line. So to just double check, right mouse click, shift right mouse to select each of the elements, and again using the green arrow just to reposition the object so that they're centered on the scene. Release to set in place. Once everything's positioned, there is one very, very, very important aspect that needs to be done in order for this to work. These two bones of the armature are the catcher and pitcher, as they're called. This is where the two avatars stand relative to each other when they're shaking hands or an action, an interactive action is happening between the two of them. Now, in order to make sure that these two bones work, the entire seating armature needs to be rotated slightly. This is a problem associated with the Cal 3D exporter for Blender, and it's important to do this in order to get the export to work properly within IMVU. So, right mouse select the helper, shift right mouse select the armature, and in top view press the number pad 5, number pad 7 so that we can see. Press the R key, rotate the helper and armature slightly. It doesn't have to be by too much. Once done, press numpad 5 just to go back into perspective so that we can inspect the mesh again. And we're just about ready to get this sorted out for IMVU. Before we do that, we need to move the helper mesh because we no longer need that. So just move that to another layer. So right mouse select, M key, click one of the layers and OK. First things first, we need to prepare the armatures. Select the seating armature, then the furniture armature, then using Ctrl J, join the two together. What we need to do next is change the relationship between the bones so that they're set up correctly relative to what IMV is expecting to see in order for this to work. So with the armature selected, right mouse click, press the tab key, and enter edit mode. Some of the bones may already be highlighted. If they are, just press the A key to deselect. Now, to change the relationship, select a bone. Just make this a little bigger so it's easier to see. A number of settings become available once a bone is selected, so right mouse click, change the name if it needs to be changed, so left mouse click in the input box. 1. Do this for all the seat nodes. 1. 1. And 1. This is numerical, so if there were more than one seating node, so if an avatar was sat on the edge of the chair for instance, the nodes associated with that position would be called O2. If there was another one, it'd be O3 and so on and so forth. So what we need to do next, once that's done, is change the relationship between the bones by selecting the bone and clicking the parent selector. Select root, select another bone, root, select another bone, root, root, and select the body and root. Another important note, if the object was just a general furniture item and it didn't have any seating nodes, to make sure that there are at least 2 bones to the armature, which is why the sample file provides a furniture armature that contains 2 bones. Before you export, even with 2 bones, you need to check the relationship between the 2 bones, so the body must be parented to the root bone. The next thing to do is to parent the mesh to the armature. So press tab key to exit edit mode on the armature. Right mouse select the mesh, shift select right mouse the armature. To parent the two together, Control P. And what we want to parent to is the armature. Don't create groups. Now the reason we select the armature last is because the last selected object is the one to which everything is parented. So the armature If we move that, press the G key, the mesh moves with it, indicating that it is the parent object for everything else in the scene. Once that's done, the next thing to do is to create a vertex group. Because of the way an armature works, each of the individual bones could potentially control a certain aspect or area of the mesh. We do this through vertex groups. So select the mesh, right mouse, press the tab key to enter edit mode, A to clear any selections, and then A again to select all. Now in the mesh properties, in vertex groups, click new. Rename that to root, and then click the assign button. To test whether this has worked properly, click deselect, and the entire mesh should deselect. Select. This now means that the mesh is properly attached to the armature and a respective bone, so that IMVU knows how the mesh is supposed to appear relative to the armature. So press tab key, exit edit mode, and we're almost ready to export this to IMVU. So before we do that, save the file. Enter, and then click Save As, and done. The final step before exporting is twofold. We need to tessellate the mesh, which converts it from quads, polygons into individual triangles. We also then need to assign an action, an animation action, to the armature. So with that selected, let's do that first. We need to create an animation action for the armature. And in the action editor, a number of bones will already be selected. To set the action for each of the bones, Control Tab to switch to pose mode, press A to deselect and A again to select everything, and then press the I key to insert a keyframe. We want lock rot. A number of additional markers will appear in the action editor next to their associated bones. We only need a single frame for this, and make sure also that the frame marker is slid all the way over to frame 1. We don't use frame 0. That's all that's needed for that. Control Tab to exit pose mode, right mouse select the mesh, Tab key, press the A key to deselect if anything is already selected, and then A again to select everything. To tessellate, Control T. The mesh should instantly change into a series of individual triangles. Exit edit mode. Let's take one quick look at the object and everything in textured mode. So Alt Z or textured. Make sure there aren't any issues, which there aren't. We're almost ready to export. Before we do, one last thing. Get rid of all the objects that are not actually part of the object that we're exporting. So select the layers that are not needed, select all, A key, and delete. We need to double check our other layers. So Shift, okay. We need to check that we only have the mesh that we need and the armature associated with it. The reason for doing this is that if we leave things in the scene, the exporter exports everything in the file. So before we do that, let's just save another copy. Save as, 4, enter, and save as. Now depending on how the Blender exporter is set up, we can do one of two things. We can either File, Export, Blender to IMVU, or the script can be loaded into a text editor and run from there. As we've got the exporter correctly loaded in Blender, all we need to do is select the objects, the armature last, File menu, Export, Blender to IMVU 4. Now we need to make sure, copy paste the folder location or manually type the location. Make sure that S, the scale, is 0. Everything else needs to be left at default, and just click the export button. Done. It will tell you quit, and that's the mesh exported. Once that's exported, it will save a number of XML files to the location that was given in the export path. These are the files that will be used in IMVU to construct the object in Create mode, which we will do next. Once you've logged into IMVU, go into Create mode as normal, derive a new product, select furniture item, and go. Essentially, all we're basically going to be doing is replacing the mesh, texture, and armature of the default chair with the ones that we've exported from Blender. First things first, change the mesh. So in the Meshes tab, add XMF, select which will be saved to the location the files were exported to, apply. That's our mesh. Change the texture, select again in the same place that the files were saved, apply, then load in our texture, apply, and that's the basic chair and its texture. Next we need to add the armature, so in config, add XFF, select, and apply, and just sit in the chair to check. And to check the capture picture nodes, go into debug, add actor, and an actor, which will be your avatar. Click the actor tab. It may take a while for the object to appear. When it does, appear, just do an action. And there we are. The capture and picture nodes are working perfectly. So that's our basic chair. All that needs to be done is for the file to be saved and then uploaded. And that's your Blender created chair uploaded to the store.